One of the last emails from Oakland City University administration to employees promised their 2 missed paychecks would be covered by this afternoon, but still their accounts sit empty. Our Emma Beck has been following this story closely the last few weeks. She joins us now with the latest. Emma?
Well, employees tell me overall communication from the university has slowed quite down. But this evening, after multiple emails to the administration, employees finally received an update after those 2 missed paychecks didn't come today like they were told to expect. In today's email, OCU President Ron Dempsey said their donors are still working to fund the 2 missed paychecks. President Dempsey originally told employees in an email Friday the funds set to cover the first missed paycheck were expected to be dispersed yesterday morning. That email also said a separate sum should have cleared and hit the funders' accounts by yesterday afternoon, which would then be covered to use the second missed paycheck by today at the latest. But in the email to employees today, President Dempsey said he was misled on the status of the payroll. President Dempsey told employees their ultimate backup to cover payroll is to sell the Deaconess building on campus, which they supposedly have a buyer for. As a reminder, employees can contact the Indiana Department of Labor to file a wage claim. The department says they've already received 3 claims from OCU employees. Rob?